It's 88.5, the SoCal Sound. My name is Hillary. Very happy to be joined by Aaron Lee Tasjan today. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Hillary.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. We met in Philly
Yes.
a couple of days ago, and it
That's
was
right.
so fun seeing you live there.
Thank you.
I have to ask about the bucket hat, because you were
Yes.
wearing this hat when I saw you, and I loved it, and I'm so happy you're
Thank
wearing
you.
it today.
Yeah, it's funny. It was a thrift store find.
Nice.
And I just loved all the colors. And then like someone was asking me, it's like, oh, like where do I get that or whatever? And I was like, I don't know. It's like a thrift store. And then they found it
No way.
on the internet somehow. And I think I paid like $8 for this or something. It turns out it's some like designer hat that when it's new it sells for like $300
Wow.
or something.
Dang. And you kept it. You didn't sell it. Good for you.
Heck no.
I'm glad you did. It looks good.
Thank you.
So I would think that a lot of our listeners know you from when you did an artist in residence for us.
Thanks for having me on that.
Of course,
That was
it was
so much fun.
super fun. Yeah, I was just going to ask, what was that experience like for you?
Amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, I think a lot of us who find our way into this as a career started by just being a fan. I really feel like some of the greatest musicians are just massive, music fans that got lucky to be able to, contribute to it and be a part of that world. And so, yeah, when you have an opportunity like that, it's really fun as a music fan. You really get to delve into your fandom,
Yeah.
and pick. And I tried really hard to like just pick a very wide range of things and stuff that I knew probably would fit in with like the sound
Yeah.
here and stuff, but then also some things that I just loved and were, just cool to bands like Samandi and
Yeah.
stuff like that, who've been around forever and been hugely influential in hip hop music and stuff like that, but not a lot of people would know about necessarily, so I like to try to find those kind of things when I'm doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
and have it be fun and musical, but then also a little bit of like, ooh, I didn't know about that before, kind of an
I think you
experience.
just described our jobs here. It's exactly what we do. So you did that very well.
You guys do a good job too.
Well, thank you. Speaking of jobs, you have a new album out. Let's talk about this.
Absolutely.
Stellar Evolution. So I was Googling it, and Stellar Evolution, I have the definition here. The process in which a star changes over time.
Yes.
Seems kind of self-explanatory, but can you talk about why you called your album that?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's when you're in the middle of writing for a record, you're kind of, you're very zoomed in, and each song you're kind of trying to really like realize each song, and it's only after you've sort of completed the recording process that you, I think, at least for me, are stepping back and going like, what are the themes
Yeah.
here, and because, the job of songwriting is to write about your inner experience, and share that. And so, there's a lot of subconscious there. There's a lot of like, I think it's kind of dangerous to try and like figure it all out. I think it's going to feel more authentic and in the moment when you are just able to kind of like be like, I don't know what I'm making,
Yeah.
but I'm laughing my tail off the whole time I'm doing it. So when I finished this, I felt like, all of these songs in some ways were just either about changes that I had made in my life or the way that I had dealt with changes that had come up that, weren't expected, and the sort of the ways in which, we can really be a steward of our own lives, and our own sort of daily perception of how we view the world and what we see. I think that's such a tricky walk sometimes, because if you want to find the bad things, if you want to look for them, like you'll find them.
Easy to find, right? Yeah.
But if you can have that perspective, even sometimes on something that is really scary, like a change that you don't control, like if you can also find the parts of it that are beautiful, that and give yourself grace, for and space, to process all of that.
Mm-hmm.
It can really, you're not just changing, you're evolving
Right.
at that point,
Right. Yeah.
and that's always been my hope as a person is to get a little better and to do a little better, and certainly I'm far from perfect like everybody else is, but like I do want to try because I actually believe in humanity, and to me that even feels kind of punk rock in a time when there's just so much dehumanization happening all over the world. I love to find the parts of it that are just human in a good way, know. And so I think the title just kind of came from the idea of like these songs are a lot about my changes, some good, some bad, some that I made, some that I had to make, some that I didn't even choose, and how you react to all of that, I think can help you have a more beautiful, present and future.
Absolutely. So you say a lot of the songs on this album have a similar theme. Was that a conscious decision, or did that kind of just happen as you were songwriting?
Yeah, it just kind of happened that way. I think, when I pulled back, at the end of the recording process and was kind of like, well, what do I have here? Like that was definitely something that stood out to me immediately. It's just like, okay, I see. Like I'm writing about these changes, and so that's a theme that I feel like luckily that was a theme that I felt like people can probably relate to that.
Yep. Yeah, it's a human condition
change,
right?
Trying to make those connections.
So when it comes to writing songs, I'm curious. Do you sit down and say, I'm going to write a song about this, I'm going to write a song about change, or do the songs tend to write themselves as you go along?
I wish I could do that.
Right?
That would probably be like, you know what? Actually, I have had, on occasion, I have had the opportunity to do that, whether it was like, soundtrack type work, or so, could you write a theme for this, or, we're looking for a song, sometimes like, I'll just give a little peek behind the music licensing world. Sometimes folks who, put the music together for TV shows and movies like that will call you up if you're an artist and say, hey, we're looking for something that's like this, or has these themes. Do you have anything, or could you create anything, that would work for that? And that's fun to do. But I feel like what's more interesting and possibly even more rewarding is to just kind of like accept this childlike state of kind of wonderment of like, I don't really know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a beautiful thing too, because I feel like when I'm coming to it from an open place like that, it becomes so much more apparent to me what pieces I have, what songs I have that are really hitting,
right?
And which ones are kind of just,
fun,
but maybe not for the record.
Yeah. Well, it's great to do both. I mean,
totally.
It's the talent to be able to do both. So you've worked with a lot of people over the years. I was looking up, you've worked with Jack White and Mark Cohn, to name a few. What's it like working with these huge, like, successful musicians?
I mean, it's at first, I think I found it intimidating. Like a lot of that was happening for me when I was a very young person. I mean, when I was playing with the New York Dolls, I was 23 or 24 years old, I think. And stepping into a band like that, you're just like, I mean, this is one of the most influential rock and roll bands, of all time. To me, it's like I'm trying to always, like, music has been such a gift and like a medicine and a salve and like an escape and a way to like build my self-confidence and feel like I have a place in the world. In those moments, I always feel like this is my chance to try to give back to music what music has given me, and I need to honor these great artists by, whatever my task is, whether I'm playing guitar in their band or writing a song or whatever it is that I'm there to do, to really just be super present and know what sort of study them a little bit, know what it is about what they do that really, gets it over and come across and try to adapt a little bit of that. I mean, it's kind of a real lesson in like, this is how music works.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And so I've always tried to pay attention to it in that way, and then like remember those things when I'm trying to do my own music, you know?
Must be life affirming just being asked by these people to, for your work. It's wild.
I remember one time it was when I was putting the Silver Tears album out, and I played a record release show in Nashville. And I was singing the show on stage and just kind of like just taking it all in and looking around at the room and just feeling so appreciative of, my friends that were there and musicians that I, knew and some of which I really admired. Lucinda Williams was there.
I love Lucinda.
Oh, me too. She is. I think she's an American poet laureate of a songwriter.
Yep.
I put her up there with Springsteen and Petty and all of those people.
Yep.
And she came backstage after the show, and we were talking. And at one point, this is so embarrassing to say, but like at one point, she was like, your songwriting kind of reminds me of Dylan. And I just thought, I guess I can quit.
Seriously. You're like,
it's not going to get
complete.
any better than that for me.
That's amazing. What a story.
Oh.
So speaking of being a younger person and music influencing you, I read that you learned to play guitar by listening to a lot of Oasis.
Sure, yeah.
So I need to know if you're team Liam or Noel.
I think back in the day, I would have said Noel. Just because I was so captured by the songwriting thing. And what I really loved about his guitar playing in the band was that it really was meant to, like, he was doing cool stuff. It was really meant to show off the song. Like, as a guitar player, to pick and choose things that would really, allow the song to be as good as it was, I think was really interesting to me. Nowadays, I'm sure you've seen the video of Liam making the tea backstage. Have you seen this?
I haven't, no.
And he's like at a festival or whatever, and he sort of is explaining how back in the 90s he would have had like a whole crew of people making his tea.
Right.
But nowadays he's got to do it all himself, and this is why there's no rock stars anymore.
It's a sad story, Liam.
To make tea for himself. He doesn't have time to drink champagne out of a cowboy boot.
Right.
With all the tea that needs to be made.
Right. That's a very British thing.
I love he's lived such a storied life and had such an incredible career, and I love the fact that he still has a sense of humor about it, and he takes it really seriously, and I just admire and appreciate that. Not to say that Noel doesn't, but because he absolutely does. But I love Liam's. I love the way that Liam has kind of softened over the years. I think it's really beautiful to see.
Although he can still throw a pretty good insult. He is
sure can.
Talented. He's talented at that. I think he called Noel a potato a couple months ago, and I was like, I don't know, it kind of works. Like I love Noel, but yeah, that kind of works.
Kind of a russet potato.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah. And potatoes are great. It's like the best food ever.
A potato.
So yeah. Favorite Oasis song?
Ooh. I'm gonna have to say probably Live Forever.
That's mine too.
I mean,
I was gonna say that.
It just captures such a time and place. And you know what's funny? I was 11 years old when What's the Story Morning Glory came out.
Okay.
So I actually heard that record first.
Right.
And I loved it so much. I had a cassette tape of it.
Nice.
Just played it over and over again until the tape got wobbly.
Wow.
And just in the span of a year. I mean, I just listened over and over and over and over again. And so I kind of was like, I can't wait till they put out a new one. And I went to the record store one day and was just delighted to find out that they had already had a previous
the back
record.
catalog.
And when I put on Definitely Maybe, I was just like, man, this might even be even better than, than What's the Story. And Live Forever was, as a young person, when you romanticize life and you romanticize love and all of those things, friendship, all of that stuff, like a song like Live Forever is like tailor-made for you.
Exactly. Yeah, I still get chills when you hear like the beginning drum beats. Like, I love that
good.
song so much. Do you think they're going to get back together? This will be my last Oasis question. Sorry.
No, I would love to see it. I don't know what the reality of it is, but I think it would be a good I think it would be a good thing for the world to
Me
see
too.
Noel and Liam reconcile
Yeah.
in that way.
And it would be great for their pocketbooks
I
as well.
bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd pay
Maybe
a lot
I
of money
could get
for
in
that.
on that
Yes.
somehow.
Can you open up for them, please?
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. So let's talk about the horror of it all. We've been playing that song a ton.
Thank you guys
we
so much for doing
love
that.
it around here. And I'm a lyrics person, so I'm always kind of listening to what you're talking about. So can you talk about what inspired that song,
Sure.
the process,
Absolutely.
why it's so good?
Aw. I think, in a lot of ways, our childhood is so informative of, our adult life,
Yep.
And in all kinds of ways, if you've had traumatic childhood experiences, if you don't process those things, they can become, toxic in your own life, and suddenly you're unconsciously doing something to others that was done to you, or things like that. So those moments, those stories, in a lot of ways are like the tapestry of our building blocks into adulthood, and my my childhood experience, was that, by the time I was like 10 or 11 years old, I was pretty aware of the fact of like, like everybody always talks about like how, the young men are, gonna reach a certain age where they find the young women attractive all of a sudden or whatever. But I kind of feel that way about all of my classmates. Like, what does that mean? And I didn't even, I just thought it meant I was like gay, probably, and I think, based on what I would see on like television and stuff at that time, it was like, okay, so gay people like get beat up or they die or something bad happens to them.
Right.
And that seems really scary to me, like I don't know, maybe I'm not, it's like you kind of go into these places
Right.
of just like, yeah, I don't, I think it's just a self-protection thing more than anything else. But, for me, having those experiences, growing up and sort of being, in the closet basically, but still having that internal dialogue with myself
Right.
of like, this is kind of what my, thing is, if I'm really being honest, growing up and processing all of that and sort of, and then researching it and reading about sexuality and the spectrum of what it can be and like all of these things, and, and then getting the opportunity to leave New Albany, Ohio and move to New York City and suddenly be surrounded by, incredible, brilliant gay people, and seeing the joy, that exists in a queer nightlife space,
Right.
Yeah. And those parties, Michael T's parties, and like, and my band Semi Precious Weapons, we got to be a part of that, and even the people who were around us at that time, my friends Tommy Cole and Roy Karras, who made a lot of the things that we wore on stage, like from scratch by hand, and they were these incredible pieces. And Justin would come out on stage and just look, amazing. All of that relates back to, just being a young person and knowing these things internally and feeling like I couldn't outwardly express them,
Right.
And even having some experiences, like, while I was in my youth, same-sex experiences, and feeling like, I have to keep this a secret, like the mentality of like, of keeping a part of yourself a secret, but then also carrying that secret for the other person too,
Right,
and that's such a tough space to inhabit, so I think horror of it all, the balance I was trying to strike there was sort of the fear of that, of being exposed basically, but then also knowing that when you're exposing who you really are, that becomes your power and your strength, you know? And so it like the verses and choruses to me are this kind of juxtaposition of like, this is the heartache and then this is the other side of going through that and not trying to go around it or under it or deny it or any of that kind of stuff, you know, which I did do for a period of time, you know? So I just want, you know, anybody that's like growing up in a place like the Midwest or whatever, where it is a more conservative place, to see that there's people like me out there who experienced it and got through it, and I'm okay.
And it has to be cathartic getting to write about it as an adult, looking back on your experiences.
It's so nice.
I love
that. I feel so fortunate to, like, even the negative parts, you know, it's like, because I wouldn't be where I am without all of that.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, it's a part of you.
Yeah.
So speaking of moving to New York from Ohio, you've moved around a lot.
Yeah.
You've lived here in Southern California. Where's home now?
Nashville for the last 10 years,
nice.
actually.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, and you have some shows coming up here in Southern California. What can people expect at an Aaron Lee Tasjan show?
Well, you know, to me, you know, the shows are, you know, nowadays really, you know, because I've been doing it, you know, this is my 5th album, you know, and I've been doing it for a little while now, and I feel like what's beautiful to me about the shows now is that they're becoming a reflection of the community that's been built, you know, through doing that, and to me that's really the goal of all of it anyway, is to, you know, when you're going out and you're being an artist, it can be such an isolating experience. But I think it's really important, or at least has been really important to me, to see it as an opportunity to build community, you know. And so now, like, I'm looking out in the crowd sometimes, and I'm like, oh, like those 3 people, like that's a mom and a dad, and that's their like queer teenager, and I get to have these conversations afterwards where they're just like, yeah, it's so hard for us sometimes to find something we all agree on, but all 3 of us like your record, you know, and we get to have this experience of like, my kid feels seen by what you're singing about, and we feel like we're able to be here with them and support that, and like those kind of things to me are the, like, if you get one of that's like a great show.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like, you're gonna make me cry in this interview. I love it. Also, I can say your shows are just a lot of fun. I just saw you a couple days ago, like I said, in Philadelphia, and it was a blast. So I just want to thank you again so much for coming in and playing some songs for us, and talking about the new album, Stellar Evolution, and have fun at your shows.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Teardrops on my dinosaur t-shirt, just a little kid swallowing my pain. Like a piece of spat out candy, first Jesus Christ goes heroin chic, checking the mail in my underwear and singing her name 'cause I couldn't speak. Used to cut such crooked lines. I did the drugs till the drugs did me. In a Republican state of mind. I did the drugs till the drugs did me. Shock and awe in the mirror. There he goes again. Whiter than an Irish spirit. Everybody's best invisible friend. Psychoactive and taken captive. I did the drugs till the drugs did me. Had no sheets upon my mattress. I did the drugs till the drugs did me. I did the drugs till the drugs did me. Shaking hands with a fallen angel took me for all that I thought I had. I saw love, but imagined danger, ready to die just for a laugh. It's a miracle I'm still alive.